I still remember that sinking feeling when I discovered my account had been completely drained after our family reunion. $215,000 gone in an instant. My brother-in-law Doug had the audacity to smirk and say they needed it more than me. What he never expected was that I had been planning for this betrayal all along. Standing there trembling with controlled rage, I reached for my bag and calmly said, "Then you will not mind what comes next." Before I begin this story, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like button if you have ever been betrayed by someone you considered family. Growing up in a blue-collar neighborhood in Detroit, I learned early that nothing in life comes easy. My parents worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table. By 18, I was working full-time while putting myself through engineering school at night. Those were tough years surviving on ramen noodles and determination, but they forged the work ethic that would eventually lead me to success. By 35, I had built a respectable career as a software engineer, specializing in cybersecurity. The irony of that expertise would later become painfully apparent. After years of saving and smart investments, I had accumulated a nest egg of over $2 million, though I lived modestly in a comfortable but unassuming home. My wife, Laura, never seemed to mind our practical lifestyle during our first few years of marriage. I met Laura at a tech conference in Chicago. She was working as an event coordinator, and we hit it off immediately. She was beautiful, charming, and seemed to appreciate my straightforward, honest approach to life. We dated for 2 years before getting married, and for the first 3 years, our marriage was everything I had hoped for. We talked about starting a family, but were waiting for the right time that somehow never came. The first cracks in our relationship appeared when Laura began spending more time with her family, particularly her sister Melissa and brother-in-law Doug. Unlike me, they lived lavishly beyond their means, always chasing the next status symbol. Doug worked in finance, but had a spotty employment record, while Melissa bounced between high-end sales jobs. They had 2 kids in private school and a mortgage on a house they clearly could not afford. Initially, I was generous with Laura's family. When Melissa needed money for her children's tuition, I happily wrote a check. When Doug's car broke down, I loaned them money for repairs. When her parents needed a new roof, I covered it without hesitation. I believed in helping family, having grown up in a household where everyone pitched in. But over time, these emergencies became more frequent, and I noticed the money never seemed to solve their actual problems. Laura began to change too. Shopping trips with Melissa resulted in expensive purchases. Vacations with her family became more extravagant. When I gently suggested we should be more careful with our spending, Laura accused me of being stingy and not understanding family obligations. The woman who once admired my responsible approach to finances now seemed embarrassed by it. The annual family reunion at her parents' lakeside home in Chicago had always been tense for me, but this year felt different. As I pulled up to their sprawling house, I noticed Doug's brand new SUV in the driveway. For someone perpetually in financial trouble, he certainly had expensive taste in vehicles. Inside, the usual chaos of family gatherings enveloped me. Laura's parents, Richard and Nancy, greeted me warmly enough, though their eyes always held a hint of judgment. Their lakeside property had been in the family for generations, and they never let anyone forget their old money status, despite evidence that their fortune had dwindled considerably over the years. "Steve, good to see you made it." Richard clasped my shoulder. "Doug was just telling us about this incredible investment opportunity. Right up your alley, I would think." That was the first red flag. Every family gathering inevitably included Doug pitching some get-rich-quick scheme that never materialized into actual profit for anyone except Doug. "Is that right?" I smiled politely as Doug launched into an elaborate explanation about cryptocurrency arbitrage that I knew was mostly nonsense. Laura stood beside her sister, both of them nodding as if Doug was a financial wizard rather than someone who had filed for bankruptcy twice. "The initial investment is substantial," Doug concluded, looking directly at me. "But the returns are guaranteed. We are talking 3, maybe 4 times your money in 6 months." "Sounds interesting," I replied non-committally. "I will have to look at the prospectus." "Oh, Steve, always so cautious." Nancy, my mother-in-law, laughed lightly. "Sometimes you have to take risks to get ahead." The conversation shifted to other topics, but throughout the afternoon I noticed repeated references to money. Richard mentioned the rising cost of maintaining their vacation property. Melissa complained about private school tuition increases. Every story seemed designed to emphasize financial strain, with sideways glances in my direction. During dinner, I excused myself to use the restroom. My laptop was in our guest room, and I had left it running to download some work files. When I returned, I noticed it had been moved slightly from its original position. The screen was still on, but something felt off. I made a mental note to check it later, but did not want to appear paranoid in front of everyone. As the evening progressed, I caught Doug watching me several times when I checked emails on my phone. His attention seemed unusually focused on my screen, and when our eyes met, he quickly looked away. Laura, too, was acting strange, spending most of her time in hushed conversations with Melissa, falling silent whenever I approached. After dinner, Laura surprised me by announcing she wanted to stay a few more days with her family. "But we both have work on Monday," I reminded her. "I can work remotely," she shrugged. "And I promised Mom I would help sort through some old family photos. You go ahead. You never really enjoy these gatherings anyway." That was true enough. I reluctantly agreed, kissing her goodbye and promising to call when I got home. The drive back should have taken 3 hours, but halfway there, my phone buzzed with a bank notification. "Unusual activity detected on your account." That was strange, since I had not made any transactions today. I pulled into a gas station to check, and what I saw made my blood run cold. My primary savings account, containing $215,000, had been completely emptied. The transactions had occurred within the last 3 hours, the money transferred through a series of accounts I did not recognize. My first call was to the bank's fraud department. The representative sounded concerned, but not particularly hopeful. "These transactions were authenticated with all your security credentials, Mr. Anderson," she explained. "The transfers were initiated from an IP address that you have used regularly." "That is impossible," I insisted. "I have not made any transfers today. The system shows these were made from a location in Chicago, Illinois. Have you been there recently?" My stomach dropped. Chicago. My in-laws' house. I thanked the representative and promised to visit my local branch first thing tomorrow to fill out the necessary paperwork. Next, I checked my laptop. Running a security scan revealed a sophisticated keylogger had been installed, recording every keystroke I made, including banking passwords. The IP address matched my in-laws' home network. I tried calling Laura repeatedly, but she did not answer. With growing suspicion and anger, I turned my car around and headed back to Chicago. It was nearly midnight when I arrived back at the lakeside house. Instead of the darkened windows, I expected lights blazed from every room, and the sound of laughter and music poured out. I parked down the street and approached quietly. Through the large bay window, I could see the entire family celebrating. Doug was showing off car keys, dangling them dramatically, while everyone applauded. I entered without knocking, and the room fell silent as all eyes turned toward me. Laura's face drained of color. Steve Richard recovered first. "We thought you were heading home." "I was," I said evenly, "until I discovered someone emptied my savings account today." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Doug broke it with a short laugh. "Look, Steve, there is no easy way to say this. We needed that money more than you do." "You stole from me," I stated flatly. "Borrowed," Melissa corrected. "Our investment opportunity needed capital immediately. You installed a keylogger on my laptop and stole my passwords." I turned to Laura. "Did you know about this?" Her hesitation told me everything. "Steve, you have to understand. This investment will benefit all of us. You can easily earn that money back, but my family needed it now." "Your family," I repeated. "Not our family." "Oh," Steve, Nancy sighed. "You have always been so separate from us, always judging our lifestyle while counting every penny. We are tired of living like paupers while you hoard money," Laura said, and the venom in her voice shocked me. "Do you know how embarrassing it is to tell my friends my husband will not even buy a new car because the old one still works fine? The money has already been moved through several accounts," Melissa added smugly. "The bank will never trace it all. And, by the way," Laura added, "I will be filing for divorce next week. My lawyer assures me I am entitled to half of everything else you own." I stood there, absorbing the full impact of their betrayal. My wife of 5 years, the woman I had loved and trusted, had conspired with her family to rob me blind. They were all watching me now, waiting for an explosion of anger, perhaps expecting me to beg or threaten. Instead, I felt an eerie calm wash over me. "I see," I said, quietly reaching for my bag. "Then you will not mind what comes next." Doug laughed. "What are you going to do? Call the police?" "It would be your word against all of ours." I pulled out my phone and played a video recording. On screen, Doug and Laura were huddled over my laptop, discussing how to access my accounts without triggering security alerts. Their voices were crystal clear, the date stamp unmistakable. "What is that?" Laura gasped. "You were spying on me. Insurance," I corrected. 6 months ago, I noticed you and Doug meeting privately whenever we visited. At first, I thought you were having an affair, which would have been bad enough. I hired a private investigator who discovered something much worse. You were plotting to steal my money." Their faces paled as the implications sank in. "You cannot prove anything," Doug bluffed. "I do not need to prove it myself. The police and FBI are very interested in wire fraud and identity theft." As if on cue, a loud bang shook the house as the front door was forced open. Several police officers streamed in, followed by 2 men in suits who identified themselves as FBI agents. "Douglas Williams," one agent asked. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy." "This is ridiculous," Doug sputtered as an officer handcuffed him. "Steve, tell them this is a misunderstanding." "Is it?" I asked calmly. "The money was transferred using credentials stolen via malware installed on my computer. The FBI has been monitoring those transactions in real time since I reported the suspicious activity 3 months ago." "3 months," Laura whispered. "You knew all along." The agents read Miranda rights to Doug, Melissa, and to Laura's horror to her as well. As they were led out, I turned to Richard and Nancy, who stood frozen in disbelief. "You knew about their plan," I stated. "It was not a question. We had no idea they would actually go through with it." Richard protested weakly. "I have recordings that suggest otherwise," I replied. "You discussed the plan over dinner last month. You advised them on how to move the money through offshore accounts." Another agent approached Richard and Nancy. "We will need you to come with us for questioning." As they were escorted out, I remained alone in the living room that had moments ago been the scene of their celebration. The house felt cavernous and cold now. I sat down heavily, the adrenaline finally wearing off. What no one in that room had known was that the $215,000 they stole was just a small fraction of my actual savings. After discovering their plot, I had moved the bulk of my assets into accounts they could not access. The money they stole was bait left deliberately to spring the trap when they took it. The legal proceedings were swift and devastating for Laura and her family. With irrefutable evidence of their conspiracy, including video recordings, documented money transfers, and the keylogger software found on my computer, prosecutors had an airtight case. Doug, as the mastermind, received 7 years for wire fraud and identity theft. Melissa got 4 years for her role in the conspiracy. Laura, my wife, of 5 years, was sentenced to 3 years plus probation. Richard and Nancy avoided jail time by cooperating with prosecutors, but they were placed on 5 years probation and ordered to pay substantial civil penalties. The court also issued a restraining order preventing any of them from contacting me again. The stolen funds were recovered, along with additional restitution. But the money seemed almost irrelevant compared to the devastation of having my entire married life revealed as a fraud. Had Laura ever loved me? Or had I just been a financial plan from the beginning? The question haunted me throughout the divorce proceedings. My lawyer was brilliant, using the criminal convictions to ensure Laura received nothing in the divorce settlement. The prenuptial agreement I had insisted upon, which Laura had reluctantly signed, held up in court. She would leave prison with nothing but her personal belongings. After the court cases concluded, I could not bear to remain in our house. Every room held memories now tainted by betrayal. I sold it along with most of our possessions, keeping only what I had owned before our marriage. The wedding photos, the gifts we had exchanged, the furniture we had chosen together, all went to donation centers or the trash. My company was understanding when I requested a transfer to our Boston office. A fresh start in a new city seemed the only way forward. I purchased a modest 2-bedroom condo within walking distance of my new workplace, and threw myself into my job. Evenings and weekends were the hardest. The silence of an empty home was deafening after years of shared life. Trust became my biggest struggle. I avoided dating, declined invitations from new colleagues, and kept even casual acquaintances at arm's length. My therapist called it a natural protective response, but acknowledged it could become a prison of my own making if I allowed it to continue indefinitely. Not everyone is like Laura and her family doctor, Patterson reminded me during our weekly sessions, but rebuilding trust will take time. A year after the move, my company sent me to a technology conference in Seattle. The 3-day event would be good for my career, but the prospect of forced socializing filled me with dread. On the second day, during a panel discussion about network security, I found myself seated next to a woman who asked surprisingly insightful questions. "You seem to know a lot about security protocols," I commented during the coffee break. "I should." She smiled. "I design secure spaces for a living, though the physical kind rather than digital. I am Rachel Donovan, interior architect." Rachel specialized in designing high-security buildings that did not feel like fortresses, balancing safety with aesthetic appeal. Her company had been hired to redesign several tech campuses, which explained her presence at the conference. Over lunch, our conversation flowed easily from professional topics to more personal ones. Rachel was smart, funny, and refreshingly direct. For the first time in ages, I enjoyed someone's company without analyzing their every word for hidden motives. "You keep doing that," she observed over dessert. "Doing what's starting to relax, then catching yourself like you are afraid to let your guard down." Her perception startled me. "I have trust issues," I admitted. "Bad breakup." "You could say that. My ex-wife and her family stole my life savings and ended up in prison for it." I waited for the usual awkward pause, the forced sympathy, or worse, the prying questions. Instead, Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "My brother emptied my college fund and disappeared when I was 17, she said simply. "Family betrayal leaves deep scars." That brief exchange marked the beginning of a friendship. We exchanged contact information and stayed in touch after the conference. Our communications were casual at first. Professional articles of mutual interest, occasional updates on projects, but gradually we shared more personal thoughts and experiences. 4 months later, Rachel's firm opened a Boston office, and she relocated to oversee it. Our friendship deepened into something more, though we both proceeded with caution. Rachel understood my hesitation better than anyone could have. She never pushed for more than I was ready to give, and I respected her boundaries in return. 3 years passed. My life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined during those dark days after Laura's betrayal. Rachel and I had married in a small private ceremony, attended by close friends and my parents. We purchased a Victorian house outside Boston and spent weekends renovating it together. 2 years ago, we had launched a security consulting business, combining her expertise in physical security design with my cybersecurity background. The business thrived, allowing me to leave my corporate job. Rachel's creative vision complemented my technical approach perfectly, and clients appreciated our holistic security solutions. More importantly, I had found genuine partnership built on mutual respect and transparency, something I now realized had always been missing with Laura. I rarely thought about my former life anymore until a random encounter forced the past back into focus. While traveling for a client meeting in Chicago, I stopped at a gas station off the highway. As I was paying, I noticed a man at the next pump, shoulders slumped, clothes worn and faded. It took a moment to recognize Doug, aged beyond his years, the confident swagger completely gone. He saw me at the same moment, his eyes widening in recognition. For a long moment, we simply stared at each other. I expected to feel anger, perhaps satisfaction at how far he had fallen, but instead found only a dull pity. "Steve," he finally said, his voice raspy, "I did not expect to ever see you again." "Likewise," I replied, my tone neutral. "I got out 8 months ago," he volunteered. "Early release for good behavior." I nodded, unsure what response he expected. An awkward silence stretched between us. "I am sorry," he finally said, the words seeming to physically pain him. "Not just for getting caught. For what we did to you. Why did you do it?" The question had lingered for years, though its importance had faded with time. Doug sighed heavily. Jealousy mostly. You came from nothing and built something real. I was born with every advantage and squandered it all. It was easier to resent your success than admit my failures. And Laura. She was unhappy long before the theft he admitted. Not with you specifically, but with the life she had chosen. Melissa convinced her she deserved more, deserved excitement and luxury. We all fed into each other's worst impulses. Where is she now, released last year? She moved to Florida with some guy she met through a prison pen pal program. He shook his head. None of us speak anymore. The family fell apart after everything happened. I nodded again, processing this information. I have to go, I said finally. Steve Doug called as I turned to leave. Can you ever forgive us? I considered the question seriously. I already have. I realized aloud, not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying that anger was exhausting. The relief on his face was palpable. Thank you. I do not want any contact with any of you, I clarified. The forgiveness does not change that boundary. I understand. He nodded, looking down. For what it is worth, I am glad you found happiness again. Laura's sister saw something about your company online. You deserve better than us. I drove away feeling strangely lighter. The encounter had closed a chapter that had remained partially open despite my best efforts to move forward. That evening, in my hotel room, I called Rachel and told her about meeting Doug. She listened quietly, then asked, Are you okay? Better than okay, I realized. I think I needed that closure more than I knew. After we hung up, I reflected on the strange path my life had taken. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of everything had ultimately led me to authentic happiness. Not immediately, and certainly not painlessly, but the journey had brought me to where I truly belonged. The money I nearly lost paled in comparison to what I had gained: self-knowledge, discernment, and the ability to recognize genuine connection. I had learned to trust my instincts when something felt wrong, a skill that served me well in both personal and professional contexts. Most importantly, I had discovered that while betrayal damages trust, it need not destroy the capacity to trust again. With Rachel, I had built a relationship founded on honesty and mutual support, rather than convenience or obligation. The greatest irony was that I now felt grateful for that painful chapter in my life. Without it, I might never have recognized the difference between superficial relationships and genuine ones. I might have continued in a marriage that looked successful from the outside but was hollow at its core. Sometimes, life's harshest lessons yield the most valuable wisdom. The family that tried to destroy me financially inadvertently set me on the path to true prosperity in all the ways that actually matter. Have you ever found that your greatest setback eventually led to unexpected growth? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming betrayal and finding strength in difficult circumstances. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted makes room for what you truly need.